In the prolonged and often contentious battle for marriage equality in the United States, it can truly be said that Gloria and Linda Bailey-Davies are pioneers. Together now for over 50 years, the happily married Cape Cod couple, both former therapists, were among the 7 couples who were litigants in the Massachusetts same-sex marriage case, Goodrich versus Department of Public Health, that led to the landmark legalization of same-sex marriage in the Bay State in 2004. Victory in that case helped create momentum for the eventual legalization of same-sex marriage throughout the U.S. in June of 2015. In this moving and wide-ranging interview with PFLAG Cape Cod's Rick Koonce, recorded just before the 2024 presidential election, Linda and Gloria, who never imagined they'd become social activists, describe how they got involved as key players in one of the most important social movements of the last 50 years. On a personal level, they also describe how they found each other, the role that ping pong played in their courtship, what their journey toward committing themselves to one another has been like, and what they see as the secrets to anyone forming and sustaining a healthy and loving long-term relationship. So Gloria and Linda Bailey-Davies, welcome to Profiles in LGBTQ plus Courage. It's such an honor to have you all here to be on our show today.
Thank you for being here.
And, it's interesting to me that in the battle for marriage equality in the United States, it can truly be said that the two of you are social pioneers. And you were among the original litigants in the Massachusetts same-sex marriage case, what we know as Goodrich versus Department of Public Health, that led to the legalization of same-sex marriage in the state in 2003, and which gave legal momentum to the subsequent legalization of same-sex marriage nationwide in the U.S. in the famous Obergefell versus Hodges decision. So as we record today, we have just celebrated the 20th anniversary of same-sex marriage being legal in Massachusetts. And at the same time, we're about a month away from a really critical presidential election, which many people fear could see a rollback of civil rights for LGBTQ plus folks. So I'd like to start today by asking both of you to share your perspective on what's happening in our country today, as we've begun to see some clawback of reproductive rights for women, attacks on DEI initiatives, and other ominous signs of an effort to roll back gains that LGBTQ plus people have made in recent decades. So, Linda, let me start with you.
Well, yeah, it's a very, very scary time. I mean, I think if the Republicans get in, we certainly need to fear our rights. And even if they don't get in, we still have so much we have to work on, especially around transgender issues. That's where there's been so many attacks. And yeah, it's been really kind of a rollback to a lot of the progress we've already made.
Gloria, what do you think accounts for this backlash against LGBTQ plus people?
Well, I think it's been brewing for a long, long time, ever since we won the right to marry. I mean, there was such opposition to that from the right wing, and really very open statements about how they would intentionally roll back a lot of the rights that were decided. And this Supreme Court certainly has the intention, and have made that clear, of thinking, for example, that Obergefell was wrongly decided. And also, just to the atmosphere of the white nationalists, and now the leadership being right at the seat of our government. The current candidate, who we hope doesn't win, has certainly avowed all the white nationalist beliefs and made it clear that he too wants to roll back a lot of these rights. Yeah. So it's not even hidden. It's right out there, and I learned a long time ago, what he says he will do, he will do. It isn't just bluffing or Trump talk or whatever ways people make excuses for what he says he will do. He will do it.
Yeah. There's a whole generation of LGBTQ plus people who've never known a world where same-sex marriage wasn't legal in this country. What would you say to them?
Well, it's hard to imagine what it used to be like. And it's hard to imagine how much marriage equality in the past 20 years has changed. And so many people are in favor of it. I mean, I can't remember what the percentage
71%, I think.
is. That what it is?
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've had such a run, really, of people being so positive and joyful. And I think, people who the younger generation needs to learn from us older people about what it was like. Because we don't want to have to go back into the closet in any way, shape, or form.
We're not going back,
We're
right?
not going back, right?
So I'm amazed when I think about you all as a couple. You've been together for 53 years, and I want to take us back and have you talk. I know you met in 1970. So share, if you would, your backstory about how you met.
Well, I went to an agency in Hartford, a children's mental health agency, and Gloria was already working there. And she was doing training for new hires. So this was like 2 weeks into my being there. And she presented this information. And I thought to myself, wow, I really like her. I want to get to know her. And she was very impressive. Then I heard that people played ping pong at lunch hour. And I love to play ping pong. So I ended up going to play ping pong one lunch hour.
And I was the champion. And I played almost every day with a group of 8 guys and me. And I could beat all of them. And every year there would be new people coming in. They would always try to find somebody who could beat me. And so this one year, they said, we have someone that we think can beat you. And I said, well, bring it on, bring it on.
So I walked into the ping pong room and there was Gloria, and I thought, oh, wow, and not only is she I wanted to get to know her, but she plays ping pong. This is really going to be fun. But I didn't look like a ping pong player. I mean, I had short mini skirts and blonde bouffant hair. I was kind of going through an identity struggle.
And I took one look at that and I thought, well, this is really going to be fun. But I never dreamed that she could beat me. So it was really quite comeuppance for me to.
So I found a great quote, I think attributed to you, Gloria. I think it was in the Washington Post. Linda presented as a blonde bouffant, too much makeup, a too short miniskirt, and straight-laced boyfriend who worked at the IRS.
That's the short version. Yeah.
Oh.
That's the short version that we'd like to erase.
So were you both dating men at the time?
I
Or?
was, just as a cover.
Okay.
And Gloria didn't.
And I
that.
wasn't.
Yeah.
I had never really gone through a phase where I wanted to date men. I thought I should, but I just couldn't do it. It just was not who I was.
So we had a ton of fun. I mean, we really played so much. We teamed up and we beat all the guys. It was just a fun time, wasn't it? And then I think I taught you to play golf. You taught me to play tennis. I mean, we really had a lot of fun in the development of our relationship in the beginning.
So talk about your courtship, because it teed up kind of slowly and gradually, right?
It did.
It did. And I think we had so much in common and so much we loved to do, and we're both really upbeat people who love doing things and learning new things. So we had a tremendous opportunity to do that. The kicker was, I don't think either one of us realized at the time that we were falling in love. Mm-hmm. We were good friends. We shared a lot. We did a lot of things together. But it really was a period of months before we realized that we were really drawn to each other in a romantic way.
I think it took me a couple of days to realize that. But the problem was I had been involved in one relationship with a woman and thought that was just a special friendship and it would never happen again. Yeah. So when I started developing feelings for Gloria, I thought, oh no, that must mean I'm queer. And back in those days, that was not a good word.
So was it shame or fear or confusion?
Internalized homophobia that we all have, because we all are raised in this society to feel shame and fear. And so for me, it was like, I can't believe this is happening again. That means something about me that I really didn't want to know and had a very hard time dealing with. But it didn't stop the feelings from growing.
Oh, the feelings grew, and I think I had more fears about it than you did. I was always thinking about, oh, we can't let anybody know. We'll lose our jobs working in a children's mental health agency. You know, people won't even want to get to know us. If people learn about it, that'll be it. I mean, we'll be isolated and it will be very... I don't think I felt internal shame about it, but I did feel a lot of fear that people would really ignore us and not want to get to know us. If that's the first thing, I said to Linda, please don't tell people we meet that the first thing. Let's let them get to know us a little bit first.
Yeah.
And then if all that goes well, then we can... Took us a long time. Took us, I'd say, about 10 years before we felt comfortable letting people know that we were a couple.
Gloria would say, don't talk with people on the golf course at the first hole. Wait until the 10th hole. So we did that. But, you know, it's funny. Yeah, it took us a very long time to come out to people because of all those feelings. But when we did come out, we both worked at this agency, and we had this couple come in and do a training on vulnerability and as a couple. And we were getting stuck in the same old fights, and we needed help. But back then, there were no lesbian therapists. And so they were looking for a couple to volunteer. And
it didn't even have to be
a couple.
Yeah, just two
if
people
you
that
work
together, if you're friends, whatever.
We were sitting on opposite sides of the room, like 200 people, and we hadn't come out to them. But I looked at Gloria and I went, like, nodded my head, like, we need to do this. And she looked at me like, what, are you crazy? But we did, we volunteered. So at the end of that day, everybody knew we were a couple. But we learned invaluable tools.
Yeah. Which is so courageous. And I want to talk more about this vulnerability contract, because I think it's a model for maybe any couple,
Sure.
For sure.
Same sex or heterosexual. And how did you come up with that? Was it based on this experience in therapy?
Yes.
Okay, in training.
Yeah.
That was their whole purpose of being there. In fact, it was a couple, a heterosexual couple, who were the heads of the Boston Family Institute. And they came, and their whole shtick about how they worked with couples was this concept that you mentioned, the vulnerability contract. Believing, of course, what we have certainly come to know and believe, that getting to know each other in a vulnerable way, which means sharing our fears and our anxieties and whatever, is crucial, because without that, we kept repeating the same patterns over. It didn't matter what the content was of the argument. It just mattered whatever it is we tried to work out. We were unknowingly doing things triggering
Yes.
the vulnerabilities that we each had.
Yes.
And their whole method of doing work with couples was to help them learn how to better understand their vulnerabilities and to really work with it in terms of learning how not to push the triggers once we know what those triggers are. Or I don't think you ever learn it all together, but when that old pattern starts reappearing, which it does, I mean, 53 years, it can still happen. It can still happen. We recognize more when each of us is getting triggered. And the contract really boils down to whoever notices first that we're slipping back into that pattern signals us in some way. And it could even be just raising a finger. We've learned to be sensitive to identify when that pattern starts. And now we have a strategy, as we've helped many, many couples with, of what are the tools that we need to have that we can deconstruct that and do something that is healing rather than harming.
Like, for example, one of my vulnerabilities is being criticized. And if Gloria was critical with me, what I would do is pull back and withdraw.
And my mother had severe depression, and when she would be in a great depression, she would pull back and be mostly catatonic. And away, hospitalized. So my fear was always, my most vulnerable fear was always being abandoned. So for Linda to pull away, shut down, cross her arms, and refuse to talk, set off the triggers in me that made me.
And what you wanted me to do when that happened, and you'd be angry and, rather verbose, like yelling, and that scared me to death. But Gloria, what she really wanted me to do is come and give her a hug. And I thought she had 3 heads. I mean, I thought there's no way I could come and approach you when you were that angry. So we made an agreement that you wouldn't yell and I would stay in the same room. That was the first step. I mean, that's kind of really step by step what we needed to do differently. And it works.
And the tools that you learned, is it around inquiry, checking in with the other person? What might be an example of a tool if you sense that the other has been triggered?
Right. I would say, if I was aware of it first, I would say to Linda, this is triggering me. And she would know instantly what I'm talking about because we would have had many, many discussions of how I get triggered. And I might say, for example, if you can't talk with me now, could you talk with me in 20 minutes? Like something like that.
Yeah.
Which gave you time to kind of regroup. And
It happened this morning. You were being critical about something. I said, do you know that you're being critical of me? And you know that's my trigger. And you stopped it immediately and put it in a different way.
I said, I took responsibility for it, even though it wasn't intentional. And I said, I am really sorry. And I rephrased what I wanted to say in a positive way rather than a kind of way. And she bounced right back. But it takes a tremendous amount of practice.
And commitment.
And building trust.
Yes.
And that's the reward, that the intimacy you can have when you can be really vulnerable with someone you love and that's why we're still together and so happy after 53 years.
Well, and it's a wonderful testimony to your all's commitment to each other, the love you have for each other. And I'm struck by the fact that these are such good lessons for any couple of any orientation or sexuality to keep in mind. And it requires patience and willingness to kind of slog through the tough times, right? Yeah. When I work with groups, I do a lot of work with teams, and there's a concept called forming, storming, norming, and performing. You may have heard about this. It's a very famous team building model, but I've often thought that it relates to how a couple come together too. You have to form, you have to storm, you sort of figure out who you are to each other, then you norm, you make some commitments, and speaking of commitments, talk a little bit about that, because I think nowadays in the LGBTQ plus world. And I'll ask you specifically about gay men, just because I think for a lot of people, but I think this could apply in the heterosexual world as well. My sense is sometimes people don't want to do the work. If it's hard, then it's not meant to be. So what would you say to that?
Well, those couples usually don't last, or they have some other way of staying in a relationship and having other relationships on the side that they find more gratifying and somehow incorporate all of that. I don't think that's as common in lesbian relationships as it is with gay men, from what we've learned and read about and so on. I think my view on that, and I know Linda shares the view, is that it takes the kind of commitment that you close the exit doors and you don't let anybody else in. And you just have to be ready to do the work if you value a long-term relationship. Some people are very happy to have what I call serial relationships. And I think you're right that it gets hard. And then it's easier for some people to leave and start out new with someone else, which we know inevitably comes to that crashing vulnerability moment. And that's what people can't get through.
Yes. And they're frightened of what this portends. I think sometimes people are concerned they'll be swallowed up. They won't retain their individuality.
Right.
And to that point, how do you all manage that dynamic?
Boundaries are really, really important. I can remember we had a psychotherapy practice together in Hartford. And when we finished the day, I would just go into Gloria's, when her last client left, I'd go into Gloria's office and want to talk. And she said, I don't want you to just walk into my office. I want you to knock. And I'm thinking, you want me to knock? I mean, we're just by ourselves. There's no clients here. No, I want you to knock because I need time to process my own stuff before I talk to you. Yeah. And I said, well, I mean, it was a little, just a little maybe hurt maybe. But then I realized, great, I'm so glad she could let me know that.
Yeah.
You know, It helped. I mean, being able to set boundaries is crucial if you're going to be in a committed long-term relationship.
Plus, I think we realized that, well, from the beginning we realized it, but it used to cause a lot of problems, that we're very different people temperamentally and how we move in the world. And Linda, well, tell them what your two nicknames were when you were a kid.
When I got lost when I was 4 years old, and the policeman found me and he said, what are your names? And I said, what's your name? And I said, Speedy. And he said, do you have another name? I said, Dynamite. So I was obviously a hyperactive child.
And right out there all the time and very friendly and very outgoing and always the type of person to connect with new people. And I'm much more on the easygoing, quiet,
reserved, I might say.
And I'm as loyal a friend as you would ever want to have in your entire lifetime, but it takes me a while to warm up and open up. And we've really had a lot of struggles around our differences in that way. Now, we love it about each other, right?
Right.
I mean, I say anyone who ever gets the pleasure of living with Linda would never have to take an antidepressant. she's so full of joy and optimism and happiness and seeing the cup full, not even half full, that it really has touched me deeply and helped me become more that way.
And Gloria is so thoughtful and sensitive and present that, I mean, I just feel so blessed I've had you in my life all these years.
Are you all each other's best friend?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And I suspect you never run out of things to talk about.
We really don't. We never get bored with each other. I mean, I just learned something about you the other day and your family. And we've talked a lot over the years about families and what it was like growing up. And I didn't know that. You know, it's just, and we're always learning stuff about each other.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I don't remember
I can't remember what it was, but it had something to do with your grandfather. But I don't remember right now. I don't remember what it was. But
no, that is true. We never run out of things to talk about, and it amazes us.
Yeah.
I mean, I say to you half the time, are you sure you're not getting bored with me?
I never get bored with you, ever.
Right.
Ever.
But isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's because we don't cover up things from each other. I think it's because whatever we're feeling and whatever we're thinking on any given day, we can talk comfortably without being afraid that we'll make judgments about each other.
Yeah.
And that's taken a long time.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, just going back to the day that same-sex marriage in Massachusetts became legal and then nationally it became legal, I think you've both said that when it became legal, it took a great weight off of your shoulders. Can you talk a little bit about why that was?
Well, first of all, what a day that was. We were riding up to Boston with our friends Sue and Sue, who were driving, thank goodness. And we heard on the radio that about the results of the case, because we had to be at a press conference at noon. And we couldn't tell from the way it was about whether we won or lost. And finally, we figured it out.
It was kind of a double negative, the way the press reported it.
And Gloria burst into tears. And I said, you have to stop crying, will you? Because she'd never let me ask if she would marry me until we won this case, if we won it. So I said, you have to stop crying. Will you marry me? And you threw
and
tears.
I just started sobbing and said yes. But, it was all the pent-up anxiety and frustration that we had those 2.5 years since filing the case until the day the decision was announced. It's like all of that just came flooding out. It was such a relief.
And talk a little bit about what the environment was like here in Massachusetts back in the early 2000s. It was not, although rights seemed to be advancing, it was still a hostile environment, wasn't it?
It was, especially when they made the decision when we won that day. And then you can explain this better, the 6-month waiting period, what happened?
Yeah, we knew on November 18th that the Supreme Court had ruled in our favor.
Supreme Judicial Court, right?
Of Massachusetts.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. And so we knew that that decision had been issued. And we were ecstatic. No less than 3 or 4 days later, we were on vacation in Florida, of all things, at your sister's. And then we heard that the governor, Mitt Romney, and the Attorney General, Tom Riley, were filing cases to overturn that because they were insisting that that's not what the Supreme Court meant. They were insisting that the Supreme Court meant we could have the rights, privileges, and obligations, but it would be civil unions, not civil marriage. And then the next 6 months were very hellish.
Stressful.
And very stressful.
Yeah. Did you ever feel personally or physically threatened, or were you ever in that kind of a situation?
I was worried about doing the lawsuit, that might happen. And actually, we never really felt that. I think the hardest part was that rally we had to go to.
Yeah, in general, we were very pleasantly surprised at all the love and support we got everywhere. And not just us, but we know that the other plaintiff couples were having the same kinds of experiences.
The 6 other couples, yeah.
Yeah, that we were all really surprised and thrilled at how much positivity we were getting. The core of the opposition were the people who were organizing rallies against equal marriage rights. And what got to me the most were the times that it was religious organizations. And GLAAD had told us, GLAAD being gay and lesbian advocates and defenders, that we would never have to put ourselves in that position. And if there was going to be any opposition, they would request that we do certain things, but they never would require it. But one of the hardest days for me was when we went to the sit-in that the Roman Catholic Church was having in one area. It was one area of Massachusetts, but it was large. And they asked us if we would just go and be a presence and stand outside. We couldn't get into the facility, but would we just be a presence on the outside? So we went with a few of our friends and people from First Parish Brewster. And Jane Lilly had her accordion, and we were standing there, and it was cold. It was in February. It was blistering cold. And by the time we got there, most of the people who were attending the rally had already gone in. So we were there singing and having little cards that said love makes a family and all those kinds of things. And then the people who had been at the rally came driving out in their cars. And when they saw who we were, they rolled down their windows, they shouted at us, they gave us the finger, they hollered out horrible things, really. And it was just devastating. And I think that's because I came from a very religious background, and I could not imagine the vitriol that was coming our way.
In the name of religion.
In the name of religion.
Yeah.
Kind of like what's happening today in the country.
The weaponization of religion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, fortunately, we had so much support and so much love, and both our families were right there with us. Even those who probably would not have been if it hadn't been that they knew and loved us.
Right.
That's the only reason they were with us. And I recall one of our dearest friends saying that she loved us and she would hope that we could get married, but she didn't feel the same way about all the other gay couples in the world.
You guys were different.
We were
Yeah,
different.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why GLAAD had so many of us plaintiff couples going around telling our stories to make it a personal story rather than a theoretical one.
Yeah.
That's really what changed things. Everybody told their story during that period of time. It's amazing.
Which humanized you. And to that point, let me ask you, nowadays we're seeing this with transgender people. They're being marginalized, stigmatized, and
murdered.
Yeah, and murdered. And what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding that people out there who are anti-LGBTQ+, what's, in your view, the biggest misunderstanding or emotion that drives their behavior?
I think they've just been taught that being different in terms of gender identity or sexual orientation is an aberration. And it's very deeply held personal beliefs that they've been taught, and many of them have never talked with a gay or lesbian person, or certainly transgender, to get any inkling of what the real stories are and who the real people are. It's just a bunch of god-awful, horrible stereotypes.
And people think they have a choice.
Yeah. That has persisted, and now we're seeing it with the transgender issue. And well, speaking of religion and church, talk about when you got involved with First Parish Brewster and about your wedding that you had there.
Oh, yeah. Well, we both had religious backgrounds, and so we stopped going to church when we got together because we realized there wasn't any place that was going to be supportive of our relationship, and we just couldn't go anywhere else. But then we kept hearing about the UU Church in Brewster, and so finally we went. And the first words out of the minister's mouth were, "If you're gay, if you're lesbian, we not only celebrate you, we celebrate your relationship." And I thought, somebody told him we were coming, and he said those words. I really couldn't believe he was saying that. But the church was just so supportive of us and our relationship. And during the whole lawsuit, I mean, people went and we went to rallies, and they went to the State House. I mean, it was just we couldn't have done it without them, really.
Yeah.
So we actually had 2 weddings. One, we got married on May 17th. That's the day that was legal. And we got married on Nauset Beach. And one of the things we didn't realize when we went there is there was a policeman there. GLAAD had a policeman go to each couple's wedding that day. It was kind of surprising. He actually lived in our neighborhood, so it was kind of nice that he was there, but it was shocking. I mean, it just made us realize, could be a scary time.
That was our legal wedding, and that was also what we referred to as our press wedding. There were hundreds of press surrounding us. Very few, none of our family, because we didn't have time, because we did not know that was going to happen. Yeah. We knew on Friday that it was going to happen on Monday. Right. Well, we didn't have time to do anything other than show up, and the press showed up. Yeah. And most of the press that spent time with us were really great.
Almost everybody was.
Almost everybody. Mika Brzezinski came and spent 2 whole days with us.
Really?
Getting to know us, talking about things. I mean,
from Morning Joe.
Yeah.
This is before she wasn't Morning Joe then.
Okay. Yeah.
But and all of the press, everybody we dealt with, everybody who did the articles on us. I mean, we never had any negative press about us anywhere that we participated in. And I'm sure there were other anonymous corners that we didn't know or didn't even see. But it was a phenomenal day. I knew that day that we were legal next of kin.
Yeah.
And that was what mattered to me the most.
Because you wanted to be there for each other if and when it was needed.
In every circumstance.
Yeah.
So that was just such a huge day.
And then we had our church wedding in July. And then when we invited our families and all our friends, and that was an amazing day. I mean,
there were like 200 people who showed up, right?
Yeah. And everybody, it was so much joy. There was so much joy, wasn't there? And
there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and at least 50% of those people were heterosexuals.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And our neighbors
Yeah.
had said they had never been to a wedding that was as moving and celebratory and where everybody in the whole place was having tears of joy.
My brother said, people clap in your church. yeah, they do.
And wave. And, if I understand correctly, neither of you started out seeking to be a social activist, right?
No.
We never did anything. I think that's one of the reasons why GLAD picked us, is because there was no inkling of our being social activists and doing this for a movement or whatever. It was us personally wanting to be married to each other and care for one another. And no, we did one thing. We marched in one gay pride parade in Hyannis.
Oh, right.
Years before our case was brought forward. And it was so embarrassing because the next morning, our picture, whoever had snapped the photograph to put in the paper, I don't think they knew anything about us. It's just they happened.
Oh,
So you got outed.
We got outed.
right.
Yes.
But that's the only thing we had done that would ever be considered activism of any kind.
In fact, it was really when things started happening. The day GLAD announced the lawsuit, there was a picture on the front page of the Cape Cod Times that said, Orleans couple sues for right to marry. And our picture was in it. And I got the paper in the driveway and I looked and I thought, oh my God. So I brought it in and said, Gloria, you got to see this. And she went white-faced. And that day, I was going to go get the mail. I said, do you want to go get the mail? No, I'm busy. I'm working. I said, you want to go out to lunch? No. We've got plenty here. You didn't go out of the house for 2 days. Yeah, it was...
Listening to your story, it's so inspiring because I came out a little later. I came out when I was in my second radio job in Charlotte. I came out and it would have been 1978, which was not a great year to come out in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And then the person who brought me out was younger. It was kind of a May-December kind of relationship. And we broke up when I moved from Charlotte up to D.C. to go to graduate school. And I learned later that he had committed suicide. Oh. And he was a young guy from Western North Carolina, not far from Asheville, where all of the storm activity is right now. And there's hardly a day goes by that I don't think of him. And if he were alive today, to see the progress that has been made. And I think neither of you expected to be married to one another in your lifetimes.
Oh, never.
No.
Never. Never.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What's your message to young people who are struggling with being LGBTQ plus? They may not know exactly where they are in terms of orientation and gender identity, but what's your advice to them?
I would say get support. Get as much support as you can and
Find
look
a
for
community.
resources.
Find a community. There's so much out there now that's available. So many groups, so many organizations, so many churches. Just don't stay isolated. Whatever. Don't stay isolated.
Yeah.
There are tons of people available to help.
Yeah. You talk a little bit about PFLAG and your own experience with PFLAG and how it is part of that constellation of resources.
We've had a little experience. We used to go to the meetings of PFLAG when they were held at First Parish Brewster, and before we were really comfortably out. And it was for our benefit, not that we were there to necessarily help anybody else, but it was very, very helpful to us. And some of the people, like Joanne Hush, who were so loving and supportive and accepting it, I think even before we started feeling so much support from the church, we used to go to some of those PFLAG meetings for ourselves. And it was very helpful.
It's so important to get support from people. And people are so positive there and such great role models. And you realize you really can be LGBTQ in this world,
And be fully out and loved and accepted and celebrated.
Yeah.
And that's what our experience has been through PFLAG and through First Parish.
Well, as I said, when you all came for dinner some months ago, I mean, people like myself are in the position we're in largely due to folks like you. And I was thinking about this last night. There's a Netflix series that's showing right now. It's called Sex Education. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a 4-season series that looks at the lives of LGBTQ plus high school students. Oh. And it is so sex positive. And again, I think what you did, what the two of you have done to contribute to social acceptance, I mean, it's helped pave the way for this. Because even when I came out some years after you all, I didn't know where to turn. And then I found dignity and I found integrity. Those groups were great for me. But I think nowadays, especially around the transgender issue, I think transgender people are where we were 50 years ago.
Definitely. Yeah. That's why we want to do stuff at the church, why we have different programs and panels and stuff that we put on.
Well, let's segue in the last few minutes to talk about some of that. And of course, talk to me about your historical roles with the Gala Ball.
Gala Ball is a blast. We've been doing it for 25 years, and we started doing it to get the LGBTQ and allies together. And we have a ball every year. This year, it will be at the Cape Cod Resort, now known as Margaritaville. And the first time we went to it, we walked in, and I just burst into tears because here's all these people. We'd never danced anywhere other than a gay bar. And here we were with all these people, and we danced together, and people were loving and accepting, and it was mind-boggling for me.
And part of the reason there were so many people who came is that we got a hate letter. When we announced we were going to do the Gala Ball, we got a hate letter, probably from someone in our own congregation.
Right.
At First Parish?
At First Parish.
Really?
Who was extremely negative and judgmental and said we would all burn in hell. And Elenita is the one who read it out loud in one of our church services. Mm-hmm. I'm going to guess that 95% of the people in our congregation came to that Gala Ball that year with us.
Wow.
So there were over 350.
To show support and solidarity.
And solidarity. Yes. And still to this very day, it has almost always been 50-50. Mm. 50 LGBTQ plus and 50 heterosexual people.
Yes.
And just so people know, it's always the Saturday before Valentine's Day. And we did that because back then, we didn't even feel comfortable going out to dinner together. We felt like we would be too spotted out as a lesbian
on Valentine's
couple.
Day.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we thought, well, we'll have our own ball then. We'll have a place that's safe for us. So it is. I think it's February 8th, right? Since you're now going to be the chair of this thing.
Yes.
February 8th at the Cape Cod Margaritaville, and it's open to everyone.
And as I've said, I hope you won't withdraw too much. If you can be emerita leaders. Ladies, wonderful conversation. Just one or two more wrap-up questions. First of all, is there anything I have not brought up that you would care to share as part of telling me your story today?
Well, the only thing we didn't talk about specifically was our families.
Yes, say a little bit.
And I don't think we could have done this much before.
No, I couldn't have.
Because neither of our families were really comfortable with us being out. And I think that the reason we could do it is that around that time, both of our families, everyone, there was not one person in our family who didn't support us and love us during that time.
Mm.
No, but before that, my parents, when they were still alive, we hadn't come out to them for the first 20 years of our relationship. They knew it. Of course, they knew it, but I couldn't deal with it with them. So if they were still alive, that would have been a hard decision for me to make.
Mm-hmm.
But,
so did either of your parents know that you were a couple?
They finally knew.
Oh, they knew.
Okay. That when
I finally came out to my mother, my dad had died.
How did she take it?
She was great about it. She was great. But I started crying. She started crying. My sister started crying.
I started crying.
Yeah.
Once I got in the room, I was out in the kitchen helping with the dishes.
It was my birthday.
And we were at a friend's house for this birthday dinner. And one of them came in the kitchen and said to me, I think I just heard Linda say the L word with her mother. And I was out there terrified to go back in the room. But she was wonderful.
She was. And then after she went back to Florida, she sent me this article, and it was about a church. And I thought, oh, no, she's not going to do that. And it was about a church that was supportive to LGBTQ. It was just great.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Last question for recording. One of my favorite words when I think about committed relationships is the word cherish. And could you each talk about what you cherish in the other?
How long do we have?
Yeah.
As long as you like.
Well, I love Gloria's tenderness to me. She's just so loving and caring and open to being close. And she's fun and funny. She makes me laugh all the time. And when I see her, my heart still goes pitter-patter. That's just the beginning.
Gloria?
Yeah, and I spoke a little about what draws me to Linda in the beginning, and it's still the very same things. I love how you're always seeing the positive in things, and you always see the positive in other people, even people that I'm kind of a little edgy with because there's something about them I don't know. Or you're always saying to me, when we get to know them, you'll see how they really are. And you're full of life and energy. And I just can't imagine if I were to design a person who was perfect for me, it would be you in all the ways I can think of. And that was so from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's even deeper and more so now.
Great.
And I do cherish our relationship more than anything else in the universe.
Ditto.
And I think that's a wonderful place for us to wrap. Thank you for listening to today's interview. Founded in 1973, PFLAG is the first and largest organization for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people and their parents, families, friends, and allies. We have over 400 chapters and more than 200,000 members and supporters nationwide. Our members come from every generation and live in cities, small towns, and rural areas across the United States. PFLAG is committed to creating a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, valued, and affirmed. For more information about PFLAG, explore the rest of this website or visit PFLAG National at pflag.org.